Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, good morning. It's a pleasure and honor to be here at Delphi Economic Forum. My name is Maniana Kalogeraki, and I am the correspondent of Hellenic Broadcasting Corporation, ERT and Athens News Agency in Cyprus. And I have the honor and pleasure to host today's discussion with three distinguished guests, three distinguished speakers. Mr. Nicholas Yatromanolakis, if you allow us to find exactly the title of today's discussion, exploring the cultural wealth, and speaking about culture, ladies and gentlemen, which is often a topic of which we are not very aware of often. So Mr. Nicholas Yatromanolakis, Deputy Minister of Culture and Sports of the Hellenic Republic, Mr. Mario Nava, excuse me for this delay, excuse me, I don't have exactly
Can we introduce ourselves, maybe?
Yes.
If you want, I introduce myself. I work in DG Reform. I'm the Director General of DG Reform, responsible for support to all countries.
Thank you so much for this. And Mrs. Rosemary Steen.
Yes. Good morning.
From Ireland?
Yes, from Ireland.
Design
and I'm
and
the
Crafts.
Chief Executive of a government-supported body called the Design and Crafts Council in Ireland, and it's a small national agency. I also chair an all-Ireland body in Ireland, the Autism-related Centre of Excellence. So I work also in North and South of Ireland. So thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. We will have, as I see, 37 minutes for our discussion after starting. And we will speak, as I said, about culture. We will have 2 questions for each speaker. And for the time that will be left, useful, hopefully, conclusions on what has been said before. Starting from Mr. Yatromanolakis. Mr. Yatromanolakis, we've seen many times speaking about culture, and the Greek government exploring about the potential of culture, which is also observed in the national RPP. Through cultural-related reforms, investments. Would you like to give us a more specific view on what the Greek government does about culture and the cultural operations and creative industries to this field?
Of course. First of all, let me thank DG Reform for setting up this panel and for actually demonstrating through this panel that actually culture can be a driver of growth and an important sector of the economy. So this is actually also what we believe in the Greek government, and that is why the Greek government is one of those, not every EU country did that, but we are one of the countries where we included the cultural sector and the creative sector in our national recovery and resilience program. So approximately 600 million are being invested through the RRF in culture in Greece. And this is both on the cultural heritage component and the contemporary culture and the creative industries component, which I oversee. You have to keep in mind that the cultural sector in Greece went through 2 consecutive crises. So first of all, we had the financial crisis, and this was a period where, for example, 18,000 professionals in the cultural industry closed their books. And then you had COVID, and the cultural sector was hit severely by COVID, not just in Greece, everywhere, because you had the lockdowns. By default, by design, cultural institutions require the congregation of a lot of people. So they were from the first ones that closed and the last ones to open. And this has impacted the sector. So for us, The RRF project was an opportunity not just to support the sector, which we did. We did that pre-RRF by supplying almost €500 million to the sector to keep it alive during COVID, but to restructure it, to reform it, and to actually change our viewpoint and go beyond culture's intrinsic value and explore the added value that culture has across the economy and different sectors. So this is what we are doing, and I'll give you some quick examples. But the good news is that it is actually working, and allow me to say, to prove this with data. So for example, through Eurostat, we know that despite COVID, in 2021, these are the latest data we have, 2021, compared to 2019, a pre-COVID year, cultural employment in Greece increased by 11.7%, which is one of the fastest growing countries. Greece is one of the fastest growing countries in cultural employment. But also, I just got the data for 2022 for the economy and some of the cultural sectors. So the revenue of cultural industries, excluding movies and books, I'll speak about that separately, between 2019 and 2022 has increased by 31% in Greece. And if we focus on film and the audiovisual sector and compare 2019 to 2022, we have a 48.8 growth in that sector. How are we doing this? What are we doing to make this happen? First of all, labor and social security reforms. A series of laws and legislation that passed, for example, compensating people for rehearsals in the performing arts. This is something that was not happening by default. A lot of people were not paid during rehearsal time. Now, by law, they have to be insured and they have to be compensated. Things like incentives to move from the gray economy of the sector to the white economy. To give you an example, in Greece, every self-employed person pays this fee called telos epididεύματος. This actually amounts to €650 per year. The cultural and creative sector, and this goes both for the cultural employees but also for craftspeople, if you continue to work throughout the crisis and you still had your books open, we are reducing your fee by almost 40%, so from $650 down to $400. If you close your books during the crisis and you reopen the books, we give you an incentive, so we zero your tax, and also we are opening an escrow account in your name, and we compensate up to €5,000 based on your revenue. So we're trying to design incentives that will actually invite people back in the white economy. Some other things that we're doing is the revival of sectors that were forgotten, and this is how I met Rosemary. Craft, for example. Craft, I mean, you would believe that the country with a 2,500-year history of craft would care about craft. Well, no. So we're starting from scratch, essentially, and we are learning from countries like Ireland, where they've done a fantastic job, and we are, again, building an ecosystem from nowhere. Another example, digital transformation. We saw how important digital access to culture was during the pandemic. It was the only way you could access culture. So we're transforming our institutions and we're investing in that. We're investing also in the industry, the entire industry, to give them money for this transformation. And of course, things like skill building, but I think we're going to talk a bit further about that down the road, and also innovations and new projects. To give you an example, that will also provide revenue to the cultural sector. To give you an example, cultural prescription. That is based on a policy paper by the WHO, and it's how actually cultural institutions can provide healthcare services together with medical services, and we're doing this together with the Ministry of Healthcare. And master plans, we are developing 14 different master plans for 14 different cities and islands right now, where we're developing cultural-centric growth plans for different cities and islands across Greece. This is the first time we're taking seriously culture as a driver of growth, and I think this is what we are seeing. We will see this trend increasing because we had all this untapped potential that we're finally, I think, realizing how much they can actually contribute.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yatromanolakis. Mr. Nava, the place is yours. We would like to hear from you, Mr. Nava, as a Director General of the DG Reform Support. The way that the European Commission, the way Europe stands at member states, in order to help them to help them grow the cultural sector. What is that Europe is doing about this in order to help the member states explore and raise their projects on culture?
Well, look, thank you very much, first of all, and thank you for the invitation. But I mean, it's very simple. Europe is a community based on principle, values, and therefore culture. Culture is at the basis of everything we do. The way we think about, for example, our relationship with the rest of the world, our way of living. If you think what we have done with COVID and the war is nothing else than putting our culture, which is protection of the weak and defense of law, in practice. Now, when it comes to culture in this sense, clearly, as you said in your introduction, there is a great positive correlation between culture and economic growth. And economic growth is certainly part of our objective. There are towns in Europe which, thanks to culture, have completely changed face. Think of Bilbao, Lens, Rotterdam, towns that did not necessarily were known for their cultural side, but when culture arrived to them in the form of a phenomenal museum or something like that, they completely changed face. But there are also other towns. Take this one, Delphi. If you ask people around the world, in US, in Europe, or in Australia, everybody knows Delphi. They probably think it's a town of, 300,000 people, 400,000 people. If you ask any person a chance, in reality, this is a town which is very small, but the culture has made it incredibly big. And this is the proof that culture works. Why culture works? Essentially because culture relies, first of all, on local strength. Culture is not delocalizable. You cannot delocalize culture. So this makes it extremely positive for employment and job. Culture attracts young people to a very large extent. If you go to the museum and so on and on, you see many students or just finished students who help them, who help you to visit the museum and so on and on. Culture is very good for micro enterprises. So there are many things. What Europe does, well, as you know, Europe has a number of programs. So let me quote few which are probably well known. First of all, we had 3-4 years ago, 2 years before COVID, in 2018, launched the new agenda for cultures, which is an agenda that provides cooperation at the cultural level. Cooperation is the name of the game. I mean, I think we are very lucky to live in Europe. Europe is the place where people want to go. I mean, we see it with any migration. The migrants want to come to Europe. In the moment we do cooperation, we were chatting outside the door about maybe a museum in Kefalonia. That makes good to Italy as well, which is just in front of Kefalonia, because the Australian or the American tourist who comes here goes to Kefalonia and then maybe crosses over and goes to Bari and sees San Nicolao or whatever he wants to see. So I believe the economic dimension that gets stronger with cooperation. Europe is based on, of course, cooperation among countries, which is very valid in the area of cultures. Of course, for that we need special rules. That's why, for example, state aid rules are a little bit more flexible for culture than for other. And you also need money, and I think we need to be clear on that. Any economic creation comes from investment, so we need to invest money. We have the Creative Europe program, but we have had the media program, which was very famous for movies. I'm myself a big fan of the media movie. Every time I go to see one, I'm very happy afterwards. The new European Bauhaus, for example, that's a very clear thing where we are putting culture and beauty, okay? Homeros was saying kalaka yagatsa, beautiful because intelligent. So we are putting culture and beauty together, and that's what we are doing. So I believe what we do is essentially a mixture of putting forward our values, which are the best defense of culture, making programs, investing, because investment is necessary, and the cooperation among countries.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Steen, good morning. Welcome to Delphi Economic Forum. Mr. Nava just mentioned about culture and investments. So I think it gives the perfect match to giving the place to you. Yes. As far as how your part is contributing to the economy of Ireland. So would you like to speak to us about it?
Yes, and I'm just so honored to be here today because there's no better place for a discussion about the role of design and craft than Delphi. Delphi is design and craft that has survived to now. And it's quite incredible when you think about that, that this is really the home of craft and design and culture. So I suppose our story in Ireland, and I thank the Minister for your kind words about the work that we have done, because I have to say my conversations with you, Minister, have continued to give me hope in terms of how we as Europe can move this forward quite quickly. So when I started working in this sector in early 2020, it was just pre the pandemic. So the issue was at that stage, the value of the sector was undefined. We had many brilliant craftspeople and designers, but if you were asked by a politician, what is the value of this, Rosemary? It was very difficult in economic terms to capture it. So we did a huge amount of work with Grant Thornton, getting accurate values for what was coming to the economy from just craft and design. So this is just one aspect of culture I appreciate, but I think it gives a huge insight into the amount of value in our economies that come from these areas. It's kind of hidden, but everybody can see it. So the first thing that we did was we looked back. The last set of data on craft and design and its value was 2012. So in 2012 in Ireland, it added 1.4 billion to Irish GDP. By 2019, it was adding 2.8, and we have done more statistics recently that will, I think, see it reach 4 billion in terms of the value just craft and design is adding to the Irish economy, which is quite incredible. And the trend that we're seeing, and it is very much enforces what the Minister has said, it's linked to a trend across Europe in terms of, I think, post the pandemic, people wanting to invest more in craft and design in the right way. And consumer trends, made local, sustainability, it's all linked together. And so that's an amazing opportunity for Europe. And I might talk about the Bauhaus initiative later, because I think that that is really, in terms of where we need to go, so incredibly important. But just back to Ireland. So we would now have about 59,000 people employed in the craft and design sectors with about 18,000 enterprises. These are growing every year, about 1,600 people constantly over the past 5 years. So while it's not very high numbers, it's very steady. But it's also very important because it's regionally based. So 70% of the work is outside the capital, which means it's in rural Ireland. It's diverse. It's very accessible to people with different skills, and it's largely led by women, which is also very important. And one of the things that we have seen is that as digital has grown and has been rolled out more and more during the pandemic, the amount of activity that is being generated by female-led enterprises is so fantastic. And we have had interest from across the world. Last week I was speaking to the ambassador in Bangladesh about how these new digital tools, and the last panel talked a lot about, will technological development be positive or negative for culture? I see it as being hugely positive, because it will put the tools in the hands of people in very diverse regional communities. So just in terms of the value, obviously there's a whole piece around tourism and the experience then that Mario mentioned in terms of how that means cities develop, and the experience that they come for craft and design, and how those cities are designed. So in terms of its value, what I'm so glad about is that the Irish government, when they saw that trend, I was there banging on the door going, please invest in this. This is a wonderful trend to support. They doubled the funding of our agency, And that has driven even more economic activity that we will be reporting on later this year. And like the Greek investment that you have made, the investment that the Irish government and our mother agency, Enterprise Ireland, have made with us, it's delivering more and more. And so I think the Commission deserves a lot of credit, because in terms of the investment in digital and the leadership on that, that is now really being felt in the European countries. And to get through the recession, it's very encouraging that these indigenous sectors that are not based on FDI are continuing to grow even this year, because consumer attitudes have changed. And that is, I think, one of the key things I'm taking from being here at this conference, actually, is that Europe is even stronger and more united than ever, because there is that grassroots now support for what the European Commission has brought to the member countries. And I think that's incredibly important.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Steen. We will proceed with basically what has been said, which I realize is a strong relation between culture, but economy also, big industries, other sectors that are related, Mr. Yatromanolakis, to culture. So one of these is also the film industries, for example, that come to Greece to invest their money on culture. But many other industries related to culture, which, allow me to say, create also job seats for many people. So what could we say about this relation, about culture and big industries that are also coming to Greece, and what more can we expect from this?
Well, I think also the cultural sector is one of the sectors that actually works, and you have to focus from the very, very, very small industries, like a two-person, a workshop, craft workshop, to big, major studios, for example, as you mentioned. So it is very important that you have a strategy as a country that caters everyone and provides incentives to everyone to keep on doing things. And some things should be scalable and some things should not. So for example, if you try to scale up crafts in a forced way, maybe the result will not be a good one. But for example, in the film industry, you do need to scale up your infrastructure in order to attract more and better productions. In Greece, what we did, and this has started a few years ago, was to provide, first of all, strong incentives for productions to come to Greece and shoot here. And this is always, how you bring them in. But then the question arises, how do you keep them coming back? And this is where you have to invest in people, primarily. Why? Because if you have good incentives, if you bring people here, but then the experience is not a positive one, if they stumble upon bureaucratic obstacles that they have to overcome, if they don't have good local crews that can help them shoot the film, if they don't find the necessary infrastructure in order to complete the production here, and then they have to go to another place to shoot, and that increases their budget, they will not come back. So you need, incentives is always a good thing, and we're very happy that we have them, but it's not enough. You have to invest in all these other areas that I mentioned, and skill building is very important in that sense. So for that reason, I give you an example of two different areas where we are investing in skill build, three actually areas where they're investing. So film industry, first of all, we are doing together with the Greek Film Center, we are upskilling existing crews through the RRF. We have programs that we do that, and also we collaborate with big studios. But we're also setting up a new institution, a new educational institutions for technical professions related to audiovisual, to film and television and the audiovisual sector. This is very important. So it's how you upskill existing professionals, but how you prepare for the next generation of professionals. Crafts, as I said, we are starting, unfortunately, almost from scratch. We are developing a network of 20 different craft schools right now in Greece, from northern Greece, for example, in Thrace, down to the island of Crete, in pottery, weaving, and wood carving, to train people in this industry. We're developing curricula together with universities, and we are opening all these different schools so that people have all the necessary skills. And then we are matching them also with designers and with people that have a knowledge even from the retail industry, because the idea is not just to produce, but also to sell. And to create, as Rosemary said, this is also an amazing way. Craft is an amazing industry if you want to have growth across a country in small villages and towns that are remote. Craft is the way to do that. And the third example about skills that we're actually focusing on is, let's say, the cultural industry at large. So we're developing right now, again, through the RF project, a platform where with catered and curated tools and classes online that cultural professionals will be able to access, and they can carve their own educational path. Because what we have discovered, and this is something that we know that is happening not just in Greece but everywhere, is that oftentimes cultural professionals lack business skills or soft skills that are required for their businesses to become sustainable and successful. So marketing, fundraising, HR management, all these things. So we're providing this kind of skills to seasoned cultural professionals that will help them grow their businesses further.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Yatromanolakis. Mr. Nava, you referred briefly in the beginning at DG Structural Reform Support and what it does, but it would be very interesting for us to learn more about it, more about DG Reform. What exactly the role of DG Reform is, and what it does for promoting culture for the citizens.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a gifted question. the question one always hopes for. What DG Reform does, our mandate is to support the member states to do.
It's real. The question is
very
realistic.
good. So our mandate is to support member states to do reforms in all areas, but namely economic reforms, structural reforms. As we all know, reforms are difficult to do because they entail an immediate cost for a future benefit, or they entail a cost on a small group for diffuse benefits. So you need some support. This is well understood, and this is why this commission decided, Ursula von der Leyen, the president, decided to ask my commissioner, Elisa Ferreira, to run this work. So this is what we do in general and in all areas that go from public finance to sustainable growth, to industry, to access to private finance, and so on and on. In the sector of culture, which is what interests us today, first of all, let me tell you, you said a few times the word industry. Maybe it's worth recalling, even if I'm sure many people know, that the European Industrial Strategy that was created in 2020, so at the peak of COVID, European Industrial Strategy has identified cultural and creative industries as one of the 14 industries under the European Industrial Strategy. And I believe this is extremely important because this is clearly a demonstration of what I was saying at the very beginning. Not only we are created on values and on culture and values permeates Europe, but also we put the money, we put the policy where the mouth is, if I may use that expression. So on the basis of that, this year in 2023, we launched a flagship. The flagship are those type of initiatives where we say to member states, we think it would be a good idea to do some reforms in this area. Okay, then member states may or may not subscribe, some not, doesn't matter, but it's good to give ideas. And we launched a flagship on industrial ecosystems, and within the industrial ecosystem, as I said, there is, of course, an innovation-oriented industrial policy, which includes cultural and creative centers. And to look at what we have already done, For example, in the beautiful island of Cyprus, not far from here, we did something very close to your job. So we are working with the authorities to transform the Cyprus craft ecosystem. Crafts and design in Cyprus are very important. I mean, we are in the area of the world that invented craft and design, so they are extremely important there, and we are working with them. But if we remain on Aphrodite's island, you see that, for example, is not only economic, but is also part of the reconciliation efforts. We have set up something called the Bilateral Committee on Cultural Heritage. And if you check on my Twitter and on my LinkedIn, you will see, for example, that a month ago we reopened a mosque and a bath in Larnaca. And several months ago, we restored the Apostolos Andreas Church, which is in the northern part of the island. So clearly, this is part of the culture. Or we restored the museum in Kyrenia. So this is clearly part of the cultural exchange, and culture, as we said at the very beginning, is also part of our way of seeing the world, and therefore is certainly part of the reconciliation. But for example, in 2022, we launched the flagship on tourism, and the flagship on tourism was mainly directed to the Ministry of Tourism, and 7 countries, including Greece, Italy, Malta, Portugal, Slovenia, Spain, Croatia, not surprisingly, let's say the countries which have the biggest touristic vocation, adhered to that flagship, and we are working with the tourism ministries to make a better promotion, making tourism more sustainable, more resilient, seeing the cooperation between them, as we said, Kefalonia, and then I cross and I go to Bari, and so on and on. We have also done other projects, but maybe let me, in closing, quote one that we have done it here with the Hellenic Organization of Cultural Resources Development. That was a very interesting project because it was at the cross point exactly between culture and economics. We worked with them on how better to make money, because there is nothing wrong in making money with culture, make money and still keep the museum available. So, for example, we look at museum shops, we look at ways through which tickets are sold. As you know, very often one of the problems of the museum is that it costs too much to keep it open. Now you can sell a ticket informatically, so you can open it, and so on and on. And I believe all of these has really shown how much is possible to do, and it has shown truly the potential of that. In closing, the first time in my life I was in this very beautiful town in Delphi. I was 16, which is not exactly a couple of years ago, and the museum was completely different. And if you go now, you see the progress that has been done. You see how much innovation there is into that. You see how much job creation there is into that. Last year, with my team, we went up to the museum. We had a guide. We had a tour in the renewed museum. This is clearly the investment that becomes profitable.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Steen, Mr. Nava mentioned quite a few times the phrase, we work together, yes. We work together. Yes. And he referred to specific countries and projects that countries and people work together. So what's your view on how we can do this in order to deliver craft design across Europe?
See, there's nothing more powerful than people when you get a group of like-minded people together. It's quite incredible the energy that comes from it. So in Ireland, and that's why the sectoral cluster approach is so clever, because if the capacity begins to build in the cluster, it begins to develop very clever ideas. So in Ireland, how that worked was, during the pandemic, our cluster with funding from our department came up with a campaign for consumer spending called Made Local. And it actually became one of the biggest consumer campaigns during 22-23, with huge consumer support on local media, where we told the stories of individual craftspeople, and then consumers supported the engagement with the person, their community, That was what they really wanted to connect with. So that was incredibly important. The next thing that happened then was we began to work with the airport, with the Airrianta International, who have been a fabulous partner, and this was something I was recommending to the Minister. So now if you travel through Dublin Airport, you will see 2 state-of-the-art Design Ireland shops, which are beautiful and contain extremely high-quality handmade Irish craft. And they are selling extremely strongly. All the retailers are coming to me saying, can we have a Design Ireland outlet in our store because of the interest? And it has been really fantastic in terms of getting the brand of so many makers. We would have 60 makers in one shop, in one terminal, another 70 in another. This is real clusters in action, because the very best then are in the stores, and everybody wants to come in now. So we will be running a competition to enter that later in the year again, and that sets a very high standard then within the cluster for who can actually get into a store and sell. So that's been really important. The next challenge is around the skills piece that you all discussed. And I have to say, it's just so great, because when we first met, Minister, we were talking about the Jewellery Centre of Excellence, which we are due to open in the next few weeks with funding from the European Commission in a town called Thomastown in County Kilkenny. And that will be a European Centre of Excellence for jewellery manufacturing and craft. And I really hope that this will be an operation where we can cooperate with yourself, Minister, and Greece in terms of the expansion of your education offering, where there's potential for exchange. I know Erasmus at some stage was between universities, but maybe as we roll out more education in these areas, there may be potential for exchanges. There is that issue around skills is really something that the sector, the cluster, we have to prepare the next generation. Outside of that then, in regard to design, we have in our National Development Plan in Ireland a plan for a National Design Centre, and that is incredibly important in terms of the challenges around sustainability and climate that all of the countries are facing. And it is hoped, I hope, that we will play a really active role in the development of that centre, and that it will become a centre of excellence in terms of how design can be used to make the everyday beautiful, but also to address real issues around public acceptance, around infrastructure. I came from a background trying to build many, many challenging infrastructure projects with the grid and with mobile networks. And the key thing I learned that was missing, that was wrong, was they were not beautiful. The design was not right. When the design was right, there were no problems with the project. And it is something that we need to really discuss more at a senior strategic level. People are not difficult. People do not object because they want to object. People object because they want to see something beautiful in their everyday life. And I really feel I must campaign for this, because we could solve so many of these big problems much more quickly with design at the centre of our thinking. Which brings me on to the Bauhaus project, which I have such respect for this. This is a brilliant idea to bring this back at this moment. And we are a communication partner in Ireland for the Bauhaus project, and we have worked to support the messaging that is coming out on that. I suppose my big request is to say that we would love to see a Bauhaus flagship centre in Ireland as part of the developments. It's incredibly important, I think, that each European country has a Bauhaus lighthouse that becomes a centre for discussions around the importance of design in society. And it should include craft, it should include the entire creative sector, and engage our communities, because I really feel that when people are engaged and understand the direction of European policy at local level, when they will see the beautiful jewellery school, the investment in their community, it makes, you know, even though things are very, very difficult, it gives us hope for the future. And like Delphi, it's a beacon of hope. So we really want to be involved in that as well.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Steen. We have just a few seconds for a conclusion, for a closing comment from our distinguished speakers. Mr. Nava, you will allow me to start from you, then Mrs. Steen, and Mr. Yatromanolakis as the hosting country to conclude finally. So how we can take advantage of culture, Mr. Nava?
I think the most important thing that came out from here, this meeting, is what you just said: beauty is culture. We need to understand that beauty is cultural. Beauty is not genetic, it's cultural. Karaka Yagatsa of Homerus is exactly that. You make beauty if you want to make beauty. And I think this is crucial. We need to do it.
Mrs. Steen?
buy local, support your craftspeople, support your designers. Buy something that means something to you when you see it from your local makers, and really enjoy it. It's part of us. It's part of being a European, is investing in beautiful and craft and design, and it does wonderful things for society. So that's my call to action.
Support locality.
Support local.
Yes. Mr. Yatromanolakis?
When you give money to culture, it is an investment, and sometimes we forget that. It is an investment, and it will pay back in multiple ways. It's about growth, it's about social cohesion, it's about preserving your identity, it's about opening your mind, and it is never money that is not well spent. So more money to culture from the European Commission, from our national governments, is always a good idea.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you. Both Steen and